our team was systemic risks from AI, and one of the first conversations we had was, what is not a systemic risk from AI? And we decided basically nothing. So we took on solving all of the problems, and you'll be shocked to hear we did not come up with concrete solutions to all of them. But we did come up with a process for how to explore a situation like this in the first place, where most of the problems are wicked problems, which you can read the definition here if you don't know it. Systemic problems are especially wicked because they're not always obvious from a particular subset or a particular domain of the system as a whole. Complex systems are chaotic systems, which means there's high sensitivity to digital conditions. I know I'm speaking to the choir here, just going through this really quickly to set us up for the rest of the presentation. Interconnected complex systems, such as our global economy, mean that problems are contagious. So one small problem one place can suddenly turn into a huge conflagration elsewhere. This is true even for risks with small initial impact, which does not apply to most AI risks. So what is the first thing you do in the situation? You figure out what the problems are. So the first part of our two-part solution is, oh yeah, spreadsheet, a taxonomy of systemic risks.
Well, first I want to say I'm really proud of our team to tackle such a wicked problem. And we have a larger spreadsheet where, we've looked at a lot of different existential risk factors, and that has a lot more. We wanted to specifically present one that's looking at economy, culture, and government to just walk through a flow through of how that potentially could lead to existential risk.
Maybe we can start with the endpoints.
I was going to start from the top.
You want to start from the top? Okay.
Yeah. So first is on the economic side, potentially loss of jobs. So either from physical labor, from actual creativity labor, even different ways of people losing their jobs, which leads to economic disruption.
It's locally rational for every employer to make fewer hires.
Yes. On the mental health or sense-making side, there's obviously deepfakes, which breaks our epistemic commons, persuasion, potential bubbles, which actually breaks down our cultural fabric.
TikTok getting stickier than it is currently.
Great. So both of those potentially go down two different paths. One is, this leads to civil unrest, or it could actually lead to breakdown of our democracies and how we actually make decision-making and the government as a whole. From there, we actually have two different scenarios. One is it leads to civil war, or it just devolves into chaos. And then finally, from there, we look at great powers wars from a civil war because you want to actually deflect your internal issues and go abroad, versus actually then moving into global power wars, into extinction, or just a lack of potential anarchy, no global order.
Yeah. So the endpoint. One thing I'd be curious to check with you all, because this will plug into work we're going to be doing this summer at Lionheart, is for like a very, very zoomed out view, are these endpoints the correct failure cases? I think we're basically mapping out what Bostrom did decades ago, but I want to double check. I think the three ways that this can go wrong. One is that we all go extinct. We're all familiar with that one. Then there's two other ones, and one is like too much state control. So you get something like a totalitarian lock-in. And the other is too little state control, and you get anarchy that can go from like, we have our visions of this, right? It's like Mad Max, it's like Fallout, right? So those seem like the three different endpoints that we could be headed towards. If there are others, I'd be curious to expand on that. And this needs I think this is a good first pass. We need to do more developing, because you can draw more arrows going to more things. But I think this is roughly some of the core pathways that we're feeling currently.
Cool. Yeah. Couple of final notes. One is, there's more pathways that we list up here that are not issued here. And then two is we are looking at solutions to potentially monitor some of these things.
So what do we do? One idea we had is come up with risk observatories for early identification of potential problems, where a risk observatory is just a dashboard of metrics that would constitute early warning signs for some problem that could be a huge deal later on. But if you identify, if you identify the problems at all, you're already on the right track. And two, if you identify them early, you often end up with smaller problems that have more obvious or more tractable solutions to them. The centralization and automation of these risks means that experts who have domain expertise can focus on actually coming up with the solutions. And if it's all in one place, then it's easier for people to notice that there are early warning signs in the first place. One really good example, I think, of this is all of the public data on COVID transmission that was coming out in early 2020 that ended up actually changing the way that people operated, even when the CDC was giving out bad advice. there are reasons that this hasn't happened. Systems react quickly. Identifying leading indicators is difficult. High domain expertise, obviously. A lot of these metrics are competitively useful, differing per domain. And so that means that they're not always going to be publicly accessible to our conception of a project like this. And then public good funding is an unsolved problem, but what else is new? We had an idea for what an early version of this project could look like, which is picking a single domain with a lot of available data, focusing on something narrow that's, thank you, you can read the rest of the slide, I guess. Okay. Starting with something narrow, putting a lot of focus on that, choosing something where there's a lot of data available, and then scaffolding out kind of from there adjacent domains where whatever you come up with for the first domain can also inform later ones. We thought that maybe a potential initial domain could be macroeconomic disruption, probably for a specific country, probably for the US. There are a bunch of existing public APIs for this data from government agencies, and then there are already a lot of people trying to quantify economic dynamics because you could make money from them. So there's visibility into this already just for different purposes than we have. Also, we think it should be open source because public goods are great. Great. Anything else, guys?
Questions, comments? Wait, you guys stay right here. We stay.
Yes.
In the positive sense of the word.
It seems like a lot of the risks here are coming from psychological effects, and so like I see that there's mental health, there's disruption of democracy, which is a kind of deception. As far as the final cases, what I'd be interested in is whether or not those final cases, even though we're considering them failure modes, are actually considered desirable. Perhaps through either deceptive means or a failure to create proper alignment. For instance, with totalitarian lock-in, there's the whole Brave New World scenario, which some people would consider to be very desirable simply because it's an easing of pain and would ease the pain of a lot of these things. And so if I was an AI, one thing that I would love to do is to perhaps control people to think that, yes, the cat pictures are enough to soothe their pain, and that's how I would deceive society into a totalitarian lock-in. Do you think that the risk framework that you've devised could address that or could be extended to address that?
We should probably break these out. So I think there should be like Brave New World flavor and 1984 flavor. And Brave New World flavor feels like a middling outcome, which I don't want to shoot for, but it's not the worst. Or if it's literally like a boot in the face of man for eternity, no good. We don't want that. Yeah, Switzerland's in there somewhere. Yeah, we could factor it out.
Yeah, and I think Bostrom kind of lays out a framework for something like this, like the whole like global surveillance world. Just some paper he wrote like 20 years ago.
Vulnerable word hypothesis?
Say that again?
Vulnerable word hypothesis?
Probably. Yeah. He writes about this.
Yeah, there is an issue there with that whereby one way, especially if you're concerned about takeover from a singleton, right? There's a draw to develop a surveillance state, which Bostrom has to wrestle with in his worldview. And then obviously surveillance state is massively dual use and has bad vibes. So I think there is an yeah.
So as someone who works with like econ data and like there's a lot of like leading indicators for like recessions, but none of them are foolproof. And like there can be like a drop in unemployment. Is that because we have AI? Is that because we have growth in productivity? Is that because we just have like a better economy? We don't know that until like months down the road, until like something actually happens. And so like when we're trying to build leading indicators, how would we even do that concretely for something that like has not happened before?
I think it'd be interesting to explore just like general world modeling, like trying to predict events before they happen. That was something I was thinking about. Like if you could create suitably good computational models of how multipolar scenarios might disseminate, then maybe you could get some okay predictions about outcomes.
There is like an econ model called DSG where they try to model the economy, doesn't work that well. Even though it's like
I think you can probably outperform academic economists. I think
fair.
you can probably do a lot of work with Twitter if you're a super user and if you layer on automation, although, like if you read Zaviz's reports on the state of AI, he's like one guy who I think is like crushing it in terms of like what's going on. And it's just like him and like 4 monitors, right?
I think the real expert is you find experts who can do this. and then get them to do that work. And I think that maybe some of them are even academic economists, but I think super forecasters, people who have a proven track record of being able to be on the ball on what's going to happen a little bit in advance of other people, are out there. There are people with disproportionate ability to do that. And I think that billing this as something publicly accessible and as a public good makes it maybe more likely that those people will want to participate.
For me, comparables today would be like the Economic Forecast Institute as part of the Economist group, right? Or the World Economic Forum that has these global risk reports and kind of other similar efforts, trying to look at like the next few years and what are the economic indicators and try to raise awareness of like pathways to solutions and things.
I really think you're asking a really interesting question, specifically because a lot of how we actually try and figure out, let's say, inflation data is very actually lagged. And there's actually other new methods where we can potentially, through AI and different systems, be able to get more real-time data for us to then do better forecasting in the future. Like, for example, right now, it seems like the central bank only has the ability to kind of like understand what's happening potentially into the future for the next little while. And a lot of this very sledgehammery type of, because they don't have that amount of data that they need on a granular level to actually make decisions.
All right. Thank you, guys.